Welcome to CommercialDrones.fm, the podcast that explores the commercial drone industry, the people who power it, and the concepts that drive it. I'm your host, Ian Smith. Hey everybody, and welcome to Commercial Drones FM. Today we've got a really unique episode in that we have two guests on one mic. So you're going to have to go ahead and excuse any bumps or any weird sounds coming from the mic being shared with two people. But we've got a really cool show here today. One of my favorite drone startups that I've heard about in the past at least 12 months. We've got the guys from DroneSeed, based out of Seattle, Washington, Grant Canary, who's the CEO, and then Jeff Prouty, who is the CTO. So two of the three co-founders of DroneSeed. So thank you guys so much for being here. Let's do the little mic tango dance. And maybe Grant, you can say hello to everybody first, and then we'll hand it on over to Jeff.
Hello, this is Grant jumping in here on the mic.
Hi, this is Jeff.
Thanks, guys. Okay, cool. So we'll do this little coordinated mic handoff as we go through the show. But first of all, DroneSeed, as I mentioned, is one of the very unique and very interesting startups that I saw come out of drones. And one of the reasons why I feel that way is because typically drones are flying around taking pictures and videos of things. But what you guys are doing is doing physical labor kind of with drones. And so what I saw and like a little bit of background was that you guys made a company and a custom drone that was shooting seeds into the ground, planting trees from a drone. So with that in mind, can you give us, maybe Grant, you can start off with your background first, and then we'll lead up to what DroneSeed is from your perspective.
Sure. So I'm a two-time entrepreneur. Everything that I've done has been in the clean tech or in a renewable or sustainable space. That's U.S. Green Building Council, that's Vestas Wind Energy, and then the last company basically built a protein factory using maggots. So taking food waste, feeding it to insects, they're high in proteins and fats. It got acquired. We did two $5 million VC rounds, built a 60,000 square foot factory that's a maggot factory. So that was my background going into it. And then that kind of, then jump in here, Jeff.
I tried to keep a straight face when you were saying that, but then I just couldn't hold it.
That's why I love saying it, is because it just breaks people out of that mold. They're like, oh yeah, insects, whatever. Like, no, this is a 60,000 square foot maggot factory. So...
So yeah, Jeff, tell us your background before you started DroneSeed.
Sure. So I was an engineer over at Google in Seattle area, working on Google Maps, doing a lot of street view rendering, then as well doing some VR playback for both capture and just immersive experiences.
Awesome. Okay, and so how did you guys start DroneSeed? What, you went from Google and maggots to a drone company shooting seeds into the ground.
So the maggot company is still going strong. I left after the acquisition, and then after it got, we built our factory, and so sort of taking a look at like, hey, what do I want to do next? And mocked up a bunch of ideas. Went through a lean startup process of figuring out what worked. Put them in front of really smart people who were like, nope, never do that. So that was like, all right, that's not going to be idea. And basically one of my friends was giving me shit at a bar, and he was like, well, I guess you're going to plant trees, huh? If you care that much about carbon, which is like my big thing, like carbon. And so based off of that, it was like, okay, well, how are trees planted? And so the problem that we really solve is there's this very antiquated way of planting trees. You would assume that like with agriculture, like everything is like super automated. You've got GPS driven tractors. You can watch a family episode of Friends while like things are being planted, right? But for forestry, it's still hauling trees out to site with like bags on your hips. And you show people a video of this and they're like, what? Like that's how it's done? Like that looks like 1920s farming. And so that's where we started. Like
saplings, like hauling to kind of, they're not like tiny little
1 to 2 year old trees.
Wow. Okay. And so, Jeff, how did you meet Grant? I mean, how do you guys know each other? How did this kind of start?
Sure. I came in after they were a Techstars company. I met up with Chris DeVore, who leads the Techstars Seattle, and I said, hey, I'm looking for something new, a little less big company, a little small company. I'm really interested in hardware and software, And Chris said, hey, you got to meet these drone guys. Like, they're doing both. I think you'll find them really interesting. So we hit it off, and here I am.
Seems like a good match. So there is a third founder that is not here with us today. Who's that?
Logan Elliott.
Okay, cool. And what does Logan do?
Logan's VP of Operations.
Okay.
So he's basically out there in the trenches, first one to show up on a site, basically managing everything that we do on the site and the people at the site.
Okay, cool. So now let's get to DroneSeed then. So what is it that you guys do? I mean, you identified this problem, this issue. You wanted to plant trees and offset carbon emissions, I assume. Give us the DroneSeed pitch, I guess.
Okay, so there's a formal pitch and there's a conversational pitch. I'll give you the formal one. So basically, and shout out to Techstars, they worked on this with us for a long time.
Is that an incubator?
So Techstars is they're right up there with 500 startups with YC as far as like an awesome accelerator. Basically, it's 12 weeks. They invest in you and the networking community they're growing. That's Brad Feld, it's David Cohen. The founders, but they do it on a city basis as opposed to everyone come to the valley for 12 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. So our pitch. So DroneSeed, we are paid by timber companies and nonprofits per acre to plant tree seeds, spray to protect them, and monitor their growth. And we do each of those steps by drone. So that's the like tag. That's the like in, out, done, like in the elevator.
Boom.
What that, dig into that a little bit, what that means is we're using swarms or multi-vehicles to deliver payloads. And so what we started off with was on the planting side, and we got going. And one of the things we learned really quick, product market fit, you got to listen to your customers on this. They were like, yeah, we're going to need a lot of data to be able to convert from our current process. What you should really look at is spraying. And we're like, no, we're going to be a good startup. We're going to be so laser focused. We're going to stick to this one thing. This is our thing. And they were like, no, you should really focus on spraying. We can prove this out in 30 to 60 days. And so eventually, like, we thought about that, and we're like, okay, we had a discussion internally. And we're like, yeah, we need to focus on spraying as a go-to-market. It's like having a garden. You can't have a garden and not weed it first. And that's like so important. You can't not weed and fertilize your garden. Otherwise, it's not going to produce very well.
So is this spraying? So what I'm used to is when you talk about spraying, for me from a aerial vehicle, I'm thinking like cornfields and, other traditional like corn, soybeans, these types of crops. Are you spraying the trees, the forests?
So you're taking care of the plot of land that the trees grow into. So if you're a forestry company, pick your, most people know Weyerhaeuser is a large forestry company, right? The first thing that you'll be doing is you're just like a garden. You're going to, make sure that the space is bare. And so to do that, you've got to be able to use herbicides. The other way to do it is machetes. That's how it's done in Thailand. That's how it's done in Brazil. Machetes don't scale. So that's where you have to start off. And then you plant the trees. And then what's happening after that is you come back and you do anything that's going to overshade those trees. That's what you're looking at. Then you would spray that and kill that. So it's basically very similar to a garden.
Okay, and so that brings me to the next question, which was, so why drones? And I think you just answered that, is that drones, I guess, are scalable rather than using machetes for that. But
yeah, so let me talk to that a little bit. So in the Northwest, as well as in Thailand, as well as Brazil, it doesn't matter if you're a for-profit timber company or you're replanting the rainforest, there's going to be a huge problem in recruiting labor to do this work if you're doing it manually, and there's going to be a problem with terrain. And so basically by automating what you're doing, drones fly, they have no issues with terrain, and because drones are machines, you can program them and tell them what to do, so you're automating them. So you're solving two major pain points right there. So for your timber companies, the labor cost savings is amazing. For your rainforest, I want to speak to that a little bit because we walk a fine line. It's like, okay, great. How do you make the cost of replanting the rainforest go down? And if you're going to rely on labor to do it, went to a conference in Thailand and they said, hey, look, like everyone views this country as like, yeah, plentiful labor supply. they still have problems recruiting people because it is such an intense job. You burn twice the calories of a marathon each day when you do tree planting or equivalent work out in forestry.
Wow.
And so if you want to recruit somebody, like, you've got to like tell them like, yeah, no, like, it's going to be awesome. Like, you're going to do this. But most people will churn after a year, 6 months, because they're like, no, I would rather do a lower paying job and not be as tired and destroyed at the end of the day. Right. So, I mean, 2 marathons a day, like, you can kind of imagine, like, after 6 months of that, like, you're tired and you need to do something else. So that's what you see your problem as far as that. And it doesn't matter if it's in the US, if it's in Canada, if it's in Thailand, or if it's in Brazil, like, that's an issue. So getting to that and automating, like, that's the key feature there.
Cool. Thanks for that explanation, Grant. So I'm going to reiterate the names since we have 2 people, just so the listeners can follow along. So Jeff, real quick question. Being based in Seattle, is that coincidence? Or, like, when I think of Seattle, I think of Pacific Northwest, lots of trees. Is this a strategic decision that you guys are based there because there's a big forestry industry happening?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is a capital of forestry up there, kind of on the west coast of Seattle and Oregon, as well as BC. Grant's from Portland. I'm from Seattle. I think it just is half coincidence, but also
perfect storm.
Yeah, a perfect storm. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, okay, you mentioned briefly in your pitch, in the formal pitch, how you make money. But can you expand on that a little bit? Like, what do you guys do specifically? I mean, well, actually, let me rephrase the question. So how much of your services, so you have 3 main services: seed planting, spraying, and monitoring. This is what I'm taking from your website. Seed planting is something, so I'm just fascinated. Can we talk about this gun that's on the drone that's shooting seeds into the ground real quick? Let's forget the money right now.
We could talk about it briefly, but I want to be honest here with our audience, in that what our focus is on first is, like, those seeds don't the survival rates that you would expect as a for-profit, or frankly as a government that's paying for replanting after a wildfire or replanting the rainforest. The survival rates aren't there without being able to maintain the garden, without being able to spray and control competitive vegetation. That it's a problem. And here's how I'll explain that. Like, so if you want to replant a rainforest, or if you want to plant Doug fir is a secondary tree species. So if you leave an area of rainforest or commercial land open, you'll get, like, for 10, 20, 40 years, depending upon the ecosystem, 10 to 20 foot tall shrubs. And then you get your primary tree species, and they'll come in, and then you'll get your secondary tree species, which is that gorgeous multi-story canopy that you would see in any video of a rainforest, or it's Doug fir or pine if you're a commercial forester, and you see that as gorgeous, right? So, like, that's kind of like your 2 focuses. And so being able to have a modular payload that can do all of those things, that's where we're key. So our two key things there are modular payload and being able to use multiple vehicles. So, like, that's the technology stack that I would say we should focus on. The planting is on the horizon, but it's something that takes 1 to 2 years to prove out. And that's super important to understand.
So it's safe to say then that the kind of idea, the first idea then was, okay, we are going to use drones. We're going to shoot seeds in the ground to plant these trees and make it easier. But after learning all of the extra things going on around to make this a sustainable business, then the spraying and the monitoring became kind of like, the big focus points at this point in time.
Yep. Step 1, step 2, step 3. That's Perfect. The easiest way to say it. And, yeah. So, and just for the environmental friendlies like myself who are out there who are like, oh yeah, someday you'll get to planting. No, I'm going to say this, like, there is a lot of money on the table in planting. So we will get there, because we're not going to leave that on the table.
Nice. Cool. So can you tell me, you mentioned swarms, so multiple drones, like, can you explain, maybe Jeff, you can explain, what you guys are doing with multiple drones and why you need multiple drones, and why this is kind of unique, because we typically just see a single drone flying around to accomplish a mission for other industries right now.
Right. What we see is a large serviceable area for each of these jobs we're trying to do. And if you did it with one drone, you're going to be out there for weeks at a time. So specifically for spraying, it just would be impractical to reach the scale we're trying to hit. as well as the current, I think, payload sort of regulations and practicality. So you can't lift quite as much liquid as you'd like to, let's say a helicopter, right? So the way we see tackling that is many hands make light work, right?
And how big are these drones carrying these payloads?
Yeah, large. They're on the larger end, right? These are industrial drones that can carry, in the US, we're looking right kind of at the 55-pound limit in the Part 107.
Nice. Okay. So we have yet to have a company on the show working diligently with drones that are larger than, I don't even know, 20, 25 pounds. So this is real. Okay. The plot thickens.
Yeah. And that's
swarms of these things. How many is a swarm? So actually, there you go. What makes a swarm? I was actually in this conversation the other day with someone, and I was thinking, well, more than one drone makes a swarm as long as it's kind of working together to accomplish something.
Yeah, that's how we're thinking of it too. And I think we're going to take it to the size that makes sense for the application that we're doing.
Nice.
I can give more color on that and say, yeah, we're thinking 10, 15. And we messed around with, swarms, prides, gaggles. You're like, what is the technical definition? That's something that I think is I leave it to you to come up with the industry term for a group of...
A murder of crows.
A murder of crows.
There you go. Murder of drones. I don't know. Marketing, might need to work on that a little bit. But, okay, so these drones, they have to be large. They have to carry big payloads. So how big are the actual areas that these swarms or murders of drones are going to be spraying and kind of maintaining this area? I mean, are we talking like hundreds or thousands of acres?
Yeah. So you think large acreage. Our customers are typically over 50,000 acres of held land, owned land. The way they divide their units, because every industry has sort of their way of doing it, is 100 acres is an approximate tax parcel. And so what you're looking at is being able to do like how many units can you get done in a day? That's really one of our key metrics.
Nice. And so can you kind of, like, how many employees are you guys?
Right now we're 5 with a part-time as well.
Nice. Okay, cool. I think you guys are maybe looking for drone pilots as well. I was going to save that to the end, but it has some relevancy here.
Organically grown in there. Yeah, we're absolutely looking for drone pilots with experience. Ex-military is awesome. If you are of a technical mind and like being in rural areas, that's a core feature for us. And then also the number of flight hours you currently have on a drone. Those are the 3 things. And we've got our website, and it's got a nice little easy go through, and we're primarily focused on the Northwest, but the Southeast is something that we're looking at short term.
Okay, cool. So drones, www.droneseed.co to go ahead and check that out. And I'll repeat the website at the end of the show. So, okay, there's obviously hardware challenges when you're talking about, I mean, these are custom built drones, right? So can you tell me a little bit about the process and, understanding, oh my God, we need these massive drones, relative massive compared to the DJI Phantoms of the world, relatively massive drones flying in swarms. There's hardware challenges, there's software challenges because these are custom drones. And then of course there's regulatory challenges, which we can kind of, snake our way and then get to that last point. But maybe you can tell me, Jeff, a little bit about the hardware and software challenges you faced.
Sure. Just as you mentioned, we are kind of in that unique size class. So we are using batteries, but they are very large batteries. And there's kind of a practical limit today of what's available just from the market, right? Not a lot of people are in this size. So that's been a challenge, is figuring out logistically what is available and ready to go. There's a lot of very forward-looking technologies out there. People are trying hydrogen cells. They're trying, hybrid solutions. We're keeping a pulse on that, but batteries do seem to be like the go-to-market that everyone's using today. So that's like one example of a key part of the solution that we are investing heavily in.
And these are multi-rotor drones, I assume?
Yes, right now we're using multi-rotors.
Okay. Any interest in fixed wing, or does it just not lend itself right now to the specifics that you guys need to operationally think about?
Yeah, exactly. Depending on the payload we need to deliver, I think the actual flight platform will change. So when it comes to data collection, if you're doing a much larger scale area, that's where fixed wing definitely will give you much better outcomes.
Gotcha. And so what about the software challenges? I mean, with custom hardware doing custom work that it's not really, it's a kind of a platform designed to do whatever you tell it. What were some of the challenges? I mean, how do you even get a swarm of drones to talk to each other? Do they talk to each other? Do they talk to one control point and take commands from there? How does that work?
Yeah, so a lot of it today, that's the magic sauce. So we don't want to go too deep into it, but you're exactly right. Like, this is the meat of the problem. So a lot of it is hardware software integration. How do you trigger your payload at the right time? How do you make sure you're doing that safely? How do you audit and monitor that in real time, as well as before and after? How do you deliver those results to customers? And I think that's a big part of our problem, and that's, I think, the value that we're bringing to our customers.
That's awesome. So you previously, before we started the show, Grant was mentioning a big announcement that you guys have. And if you wouldn't mind, we'd love to hear the news, because I think it has to do with that third bullet point I was going to ask about.
The regulatory side. Yes. So we're the first company approved by the FAA to use swarms to deliver agricultural payloads. And what that means is fertilizers, herbicides, and water.
Nice. Congratulations.
There are companies out there that are focused on the multi-vehicle. There's only literally 11. And then there's one other company that's focused on the ag payloads, and we're the only one with both. So that's kind of where we've focused our attention, and that allows us, again, to do, hey, we have this modular payload, but now we can use swarms to deliver large volumes of it.
So you guys are an FAA-approved drone delivery company. You're delivering a payload.
We're dispensing a payload. So
okay.
Delivery is a very different distinction.
I was wondering if it was the same in the FAA's eyes, because you're dropping something off.
Nope, very different.
Very different. Very different.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know.
I don't want to get a phone call later.
Yeah. So, but it does matter. You make the distinction agricultural payloads. Does it matter what your payload? I mean, I guess according to delivery and the different terminology, it matters what your payload is.
Yeah, and it matters immensely where you're doing it, the control of the operating theater. So basically being able to go through that process, and especially being in forestry, we're in very, very remote areas that have large gates that control access points. So earlier in the drone ecosystem life cycle, I mean, the FAA made some demands that were totally unreasonable for film crews. And you compare that to forestry, like we could meet those demands even today. Now the FAA is evolving, but I think they had asked for 6 square blocks of Chicago to be sort of barricaded so this drone could be up in the air. And the film crew was like, that'll never work. I mean, that was a while ago, right? And the FAA has since moved on, and CNN now can use drones to fly, and it's on a tether and such. But within forestry, there's the gates that we go through are hilarious. You can ram them with a semi, and they don't actually break.
Wow.
We've seen it.
It's like a Jurassic Park gate meant to keep in the T-Rex or something.
Yeah.
So how tall do these tree canopies get in the tallest, I guess, species? Or
yeah. So just to paint a visual picture, I mean, the highest value trees are telephone pole trees. They're the straightest ones. So think the height of a telephone pole.
Wait, there's a species called telephone pole trees?
No, okay. No.
Hey, I don't know anything about forestry.
So what the highest value tree? So trees, when you're a forester, you want them to grow straight, and the straightest trees are polled because they're the most structurally sound. They have no Ys, they have fewer knots, things like that. So those are the ones that are pulled and then put into a process to weatherize them as telephone poles.
Okay. So we're not talking, hundreds of feet here. I know there's species of trees that can get massively tall, but okay. And
I mean, that from a forester's perspective, the taller they get, the better, because that's more board feet, and it just depends on where you're growing the ecosystem on how tall these things are going to get. But visually, yeah, I think telephone pole height.
And so with DroneSeed then, and I'm kind of taking this back to the beginning of, your passion, offsetting carbon emissions. So how can you give us the, I guess a summary, like how does DroneSeed helping to do that?
Mm-hmm. You got to lower costs to be able to replant the 300 million acres that have been deforested since the 1990s. And if you're a startup, you have to start with for profit because the government is a terrible first customer. That's just like bottom line. Like you will have to put people on payroll to manage the paper trail, and you will have to it might take 1 to 2 years to get your contract. And so both of those things are like non-starters for startups, right? So like the for-profit sector is really where we've focused. And then once you've mastered that and you have a cash flow, then you move into, okay, great, like let's talk about planting after a wildfire. Let's talk, there's 6 million acres that burn each year in the US. That's a market where there's the survival rates that you need are less, they're less defined than a forester who wants their 400 trees per acre density. A forest service is like, no, we want an ecosystem. What does that look like? And that starts to look a lot more interesting via our planting method, which we got very far along with before we were like, okay, no, this is the thing that we need to do to really grow as a company and make sure that this is a viable solution, not just from one of the 3 bottom lines, but from all of them.
So what are your plans for the future of the company? What can we look forward to as denizens of this earth who have to worry about these carbon emissions and things? I mean, where are you taking this? Where are you headed with DroneSeed?
So reducing those costs and being able to put swarms up in the air, you'll see that first with for-profit, and you'll start to see, okay, interesting, like this is this technology that's now disrupting the forestry industry, and then you'll start to see it move into wildfires. Then you'll start to see it move into government contracts replanting after perhaps a landslide, and then you'll start to see, okay, interesting, like we just did a technology transfer to another country, and now this is a thing that's like they're focusing on there as part of a for-profit stack. I mean, I think the easiest way to say it is, if you want a lot of people to follow you, make a lot of money. And everybody, I think every startup knows that if you become a very high valuation startup, all of a sudden everyone's like, I'm doing this, and so you can see that and you're like, okay, great. Well, like now there's a whole bunch of people working on this problem, and then it's on us to be like, we're going to stay ahead of the curve on the technology. So that's kind of where I think that's what you can look forward to.
That's awesome. Wow, guys. Okay. Well, I think we had our first bump of the table with the 2 people on the mic, sharing the mic. So I was just going to say, I think that went really well, sharing the mic between 2 people. So, guys, thank you so much for joining the show. I think that was very enlightening. I love how you took your passion, and you never really intended, it seemed, to start a drone, quote-unquote, drone company. But in order to fulfill your dreams, I guess, it was almost a requirement, because that's just the technology that can help make it happen.
Yep, that's absolutely it.
Awesome. Well, everybody, you can go ahead and you can follow DroneSeed on Twitter @DroneSeed, and then check out their website, droneseed.co, and then their blog at blog.droneseed.co to read their stories about being a startup and other interviews with drone entrepreneurs. And then, of course, if you're interested in potentially being a pilot for DroneSeed, you can go ahead and check that out on their website as well. So, guys, any last thoughts before we cut off the mics?
No, I mean, just absolutely. We are very active on Twitter and on Medium, so those aren't just throwaways. That's where we live. So come visit us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Grant. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us as well. We had Grant Canary, the CEO of DroneSeed, and Jeff Prouty, the CTO of DroneSeed. So thank you, everybody, so much for listening. And I think Jeff's going to leave us with some parting wisdom here.
Yeah, thanks for having us on the show today. This was fun.
It was our pleasure. All right, guys. Well, we're going to cut off the mics. Take care. Cheers.